So this passage makes it clear that we need to be super careful about what we say about other believers. So point number one, don't slander other Christians or spread unflattering gossip. Can we agree that that would be inappropriate? That would be evil intent? Slander, of course, and then speaking evil with an evil motive. Verse 11, again, do not speak evil against one another, brothers. So speaking evil would include slander, gossip, both very unflattering, mean-spirited, usually designed to puff you up in comparison. Have you ever noticed that? Usually when we go there, it's designed to puff us up in comparison. The commands to avoid slander and gossip are mentioned in so many different scriptures. For instance, Titus 2, verse 3 says, older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. Now, why did they just pick on older women here? I don't really know, but anyway. Maybe because they have already raised their kids and they have time to just gossip. I don't really know what it is, but anyway. And then Proverbs 16:28 says a perverse person stirs up conflict and a gossip separates close friends. So as I was pondering this, I was thinking, like, do you ever find yourself telling a funny experience, something that someone else did that is kind of funny or ridiculous or maybe even kind of stupid, and it's just like a juicy story and you just kind of find yourself telling that story to someone, but it's not very flattering to that person? Have you ever done that? I'm sure none of you have done that. Here is where you're all going to go, oh yeah, the hair salon. Because you're sitting there for a while in the seat with, so you're kind of like chit-chatting, right? And it's like, all of a sudden, you'll find yourself, because you're just chit-chatting, because you're kind of like filling the time, because you just are sitting there trapped. And so like you end up telling a story, maybe at someone else's expense, maybe a little unflattering. Has anyone ever done that? Am I the only person that's ever done that? Okay, Heidi's brave. She's like raising her hand. Other people are doing it like, maybe. But you know what I mean, that setting where you're just kind of filling time, it's so tempting to just tell a little story or two. It could be even a true story, but is it unflattering to the person that you're talking about? Here is a really good question to ask yourself before you open your mouth to talk about somebody else. And I have used this ever since I got convicted about 5 years ago of like, I knew the hair salon was my bad place. I mean, it was just like, this is my bad trap. Because you're sitting there for 2 hours or whatever, and it's like, and they're telling their stories about their horrible relatives or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, this is not good. And so I decided to ask myself this question every time I was tempted to open my mouth. How would I feel if the person I was talking about was standing right behind me and accidentally overheard this conversation? Well, okay, it just stopped me dead in my tracks. Isn't that a good question to ask all the time? If that person were a fly on the wall right now and could hear this, would I still tell this story? Even if it's true, and maybe even kind of funny, would I still tell that story? Boy, that stopped me dead in my tracks. Good question to ask ourselves all the time, in any setting. If that person I'm talking about right now could hear me, accidentally overheard, would I be embarrassed? Would I be like, oh my gosh, I really blew it, I gotta apologize? Or would they be okay with that? Good question to ask, right? The best way to control what comes out of your mouth, though, is to have a pure heart. Because what comes out of your mouth comes from what is in your heart. Luke 6, verse 45, for out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. So, ask God to purify your heart, give you a heart of love toward fellow believers, right? Okay, second point. Don't make judgmental, unflattering statements about another Christian when your motives spring from jealousy, self-righteousness, resentment, riveting gossip, selfish ambition, insecurity, making assumptions without the facts, or any other motive than loving God and loving others as you love yourself. I could probably come up with some other things to throw in there, but those seem to cover a lot of them, right? Because we often have that riveting, juicy piece of gossip, or insecurity, or resentment, or self-righteousness, or something, and so it's like all of a sudden I gotta tell this story, right? This goes to verse 11. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. And here's the deal. Remember we were talking about the law refers to the regulations and the commands that Jesus gave? You are breaking the biggest part of the law, the biggest commandment when you judge your brother and you have evil motives, because Matthew 22 tells us the biggest commandments in the law. Starting in Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." That is the most important part of the law. And when you're speaking evil of your neighbor, is that not breaking that second most important commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself? It is, right? This verse we're studying tonight in James 4 is making it super clear that we are standing in huge violation to this command of Jesus when we speak, mean-spirited, just awful, rude statements. Even if they're true stories, if they're unflattering, are we treating our neighbor as we would want to be treated? No. When we open our mouth to speak about any other Christian, whether it's your husband, your mother, your coworker, the lady at church, the person at your table, whatever, our motive has to be love. Our motive has to be love. Ephesians 4:29. "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen."